Hello everyone, welcome back to Criminal. Today we're diving into some seriously wild stories of plane hijackings. These aren't your average run-of-the-mill hijackings though. We're talking about the kind of stuff that'll make you want to drive to your destination, even if it takes 3 weeks. We've got mysterious figures disappearing into thin air, daring escapes, and some seriously intense situations that'll leave you wondering how the heck people walked away from them. So buckle up, grab your favorite beverage, and get ready for some insane tales from the skies. Picture this. It's 1971, you're on a Boeing 727, just minding your own business, maybe reading a magazine, probably smoking a cigarette because it was the 70s and nobody knew any better. The hum of the engines is a constant background noise and the flight attendants are making their rounds, offering drinks and snacks. It's just another routine flight, or so it seems. Suddenly, this dude, later known as DB Cooper, passes a note to the flight attendant. At first, she thinks it's just another lonely guy trying to flirt, but this note is different. Not exactly the "is this seat taken" kind of note. No, this one is far more sinister and alarming. This one says he's got a bomb. Imagine the shock and fear that must have gripped her at that moment. Now, DB wasn't messing around. He wanted 200 grand in cash, which, by the way, is like $1 million today, and 4 parachutes. He was very specific about his demands, leaving no room for error. The dude was specific about those parachutes too. None of that pull the string and hope for the best stuff. He wanted to make sure he had options, perhaps even to mislead the authorities about his true intentions. So the plane lands, they get the cash and the parachutes, and DB lets the passengers go free. The authorities comply, hoping to avoid any casualties. Now, here's where it gets really crazy. DB tells the pilots to head towards Mexico City. He's got a plan and he's sticking to it, but somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, this dude just vanishes. The plane is flying through a storm, the night is pitch black, and then he's gone. He jumps out of the plane with the money in the middle of the night with a storm raging below. It's a daring move, one that requires nerves of steel and precise timing. They never found the guy, or the money. Despite extensive searches and numerous theories, DB Cooper remains a ghost. Some people think he pulled off the ultimate heist. They imagine him living a life of luxury somewhere, having outsmarted everyone. Others think he probably became a bear snack somewhere in the woods. The harsh wilderness and the stormy conditions make survival seem unlikely. To this day, it's one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in aviation history. The legend of DB Cooper continues to captivate and baffle, a testament to one man's audacity and the enduring allure of the unknown. Fast forward to 1994. This time, we're talking about Air France Flight 8969. It was supposed to be a routine flight from Algiers to Paris. But as you might have guessed, nothing about this flight was routine. Just before takeoff, a group of heavily armed terrorists stormed the plane. These guys were from the armed Islamic group, and they had a terrifying plan: crash the plane into the Eiffel Tower. Can you imagine the chaos? For 3 long days, the passengers and crew were held hostage on the tarmac in Algiers. The terrorists were demanding the release of their buddies from French prisons. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a plastic knife. Finally, French commandos stormed the plane in a daring raid. It was a chaotic scene, with gunfire erupting inside the cabin. Miraculously, all of the hostages survived, but 3 of the terrorists were killed. This hijacking sent shockwaves around the world and showed just how vulnerable we are to terrorism, even when we're thousands of feet in the air. This one takes place in 1996, and it involves Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961. This flight was supposed to be a routine journey from Addis Ababa to Nairobi, but it turned into a nightmare that no one on board would ever forget. 3 young Ethiopian men, desperate for asylum, hijacked the plane shortly after takeoff. These men were fleeing political turmoil and seeking a better life, but their method was both dangerous and ill-conceived. Hijacking the plane shortly after takeoff, they brandished a fake bomb, creating an atmosphere of intense fear and uncertainty among the passengers and crew. They wanted to go to Australia, a place they believed would offer them the freedom and opportunities they were seeking. However, their lack of planning and understanding of aviation would soon become apparent. There was one major problem. They didn't know how to fly a plane. The hijackers' demands were impossible to meet, and the pilots were caught in a perilous situation. The pilots, under immense pressure, tried to manage the situation as best as they could. They were experienced professionals, but this was a scenario they had never trained for. The hijackers were waving around a fake bomb, threatening the passengers and crew, creating a tense and terrifying atmosphere on board. The passengers were gripped with fear, unsure of what would happen next. The crew tried to keep everyone calm, but the situation was spiraling out of control. They forced the pilots to fly east, towards Australia, but the pilots knew they couldn't make it on the fuel they had. The plane simply didn't have the range to reach their demanded destination. The pilots knew they were running out of fuel and tried to reason with the hijackers, explaining the dire situation. They hoped to convince them to land somewhere closer. The pilots tried to reason with the hijackers, explaining that they were going to run out of fuel over the ocean. They suggested alternative destinations, but the hijackers were adamant. The fuel gauge was dropping rapidly, and the pilots knew they were in a race against time. They needed to find a solution before it was too late, but the hijackers wouldn't listen. They were convinced the pilots were lying to them, thinking it was a ploy to avoid their demands. They were convinced the pilots were lying to them. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, with the hijackers growing more agitated by the minute. And you know what? They were right. The pilots were actually trying to land the plane on a small island in the Indian Ocean, hoping for a miracle. They knew it was their best chance for survival. The pilots identified a small island in the Indian Ocean, hoping to make an emergency landing. It was a risky maneuver, but it was their only hope. But as they were approaching the island, the engines sputtered and died. The plane was now a glider, and the pilots had to make a critical decision. The engines sputtered and died, leaving the plane without power. The pilots did their best to control the descent, but it was a losing battle. The plane crashed into the water just a few hundred yards from the shore. The impact was devastating, and the aircraft broke apart on contact with the water. It was a horrific scene, with the plane breaking apart on impact. The passengers and crew were thrown into the water, struggling to survive. With the plane breaking apart on impact, debris was scattered across the ocean. The survivors clung to whatever they could find, hoping for rescue. Out of the 175 people on board, only 50 survived. The rescue operation was swift, but the damage had been done. This hijacking shows just how desperate some people are to escape their circumstances, even if it means risking their lives and the lives of others. The lengths to which these men went highlight the extreme measures some are willing to take for a chance at a better life. The tragic outcome of this flight serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of such desperate actions. It underscores the need for better solutions to address the root causes of such desperation, so that no one feels compelled to take such drastic measures again. Our final story takes us back to 1986, to the tarmac of Karachi, Pakistan. It was a bustling day at the airport, with passengers eagerly awaiting their flights, unaware of the impending disaster. Pan Am Flight 73 was just chilling, getting ready for a flight to Frankfurt, Germany. The plane was filled with passengers from various walks of life, each with their own stories and destinations. The crew was busy ensuring everything was in order for the long journey ahead. Little did they know, their routine day was about to turn into a nightmare, when all hell broke loose. 4 armed terrorists, heavily armed and determined, stormed the plane. These men were not just any terrorists. They claimed to be from the notorious Abu Nidal organization, a group known for its ruthless tactics. They started shouting demands, threatening passengers, and firing their weapons, creating an atmosphere of sheer terror. It was a full-blown hostage situation. The passengers were paralyzed with fear, unsure of what their fate would be. The terrorists wanted the pilots to fly them to Cyprus, where their comrades were being held. The pilots, however, had to think on their feet. Cyprus was a strategic location for the terrorists, but the pilots knew that giving in to their demands could lead to even greater disaster. But the pilots, thinking quickly, decided to play a little game of stall tactics. They knew they had to buy time for the authorities to respond. They told the terrorists they needed to wait for a new crew to arrive before they could take off. This was a risky move, but it was their best shot at delaying the hijackers. Little did the hijackers know, the pilots had actually evacuated the cockpit through an overhead hatch. The plane was grounded, but the situation was far from over. The pilots' escape was a daring move, one that left the hijackers in a state of confusion. They had no idea that their plan was already starting to unravel. The plane was grounded, but the hijackers were still in control. The passengers and remaining crew were now at the mercy of these ruthless men. The hijackers held the passengers and remaining crew hostage for over 16 hours. Tensions were running high, and the atmosphere inside the plane was one of sheer terror. The hijackers were growing increasingly agitated, and the passengers were in a state of constant fear. Every passing minute felt like an eternity, and things were getting increasingly violent. The hijackers were losing patience, and their threats were becoming more severe. Finally, the terrorists started shooting passengers in cold blood. The situation had reached a breaking point, and the need for a resolution was urgent. That's when Pakistani commandos stormed the plane. These brave men were prepared to risk their lives to save the hostages. It was a chaotic scene, with gunfire and explosions rocking the aircraft. The commandos had to act swiftly and decisively to neutralize the threat. The battle inside the plane was intense, with bullets flying and explosions shaking the aircraft. The commandos were determined to end the hijacking, no matter the cost. In the end, 20 passengers were killed, and over 100 were injured. The aftermath was a scene of devastation and heartbreak. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, helping the injured and providing much-needed support to the survivors. The bravery of the commandos and the resilience of the passengers were evident in the face of such tragedy. This hijacking was a stark reminder of the human cost of terrorism. The lives lost and the trauma endured by the survivors highlighted the devastating impact of such acts of violence, and the bravery of those who put their lives on the line to save others. The commandos' heroic actions were a testament to their courage and dedication, and their efforts will never be forgotten. Man, we covered some heavy stuff today. These stories are a wild ride, and they really make you think about the world we live in. The skies can be a scary place, but they're also a testament to human resilience and the power of hope. If you dug this deep dive into the dark side of aviation, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more mind-blowing stories. And hey, if you've got a crazy story of your own, drop it in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep your eyes on the skies. You never know what you might see up there.